Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Yokai Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a really fun VR. It's called Picture Book Decks, and it's a tag that has been created by Second Thoughts About the Mission. I'll make sure to put her video in the link to her video in the description box below. But the first time I've seen this video, this tag was in Sharon's channel, so Trio of Witches Tarot, and I will make sure to put her video in the description box below as well. So these are the decks that remind me of picture books. I know that I'm quite late to join the party on this tag because I think the first video was released a few weeks ago, but I was overseas and I did not always have access to Wi-Fi, which meant that I couldn't really watch videos on YouTube. But as soon as I saw the video on Sharon's channel, I actually thought it was very, very fun, and so here I am. So the first deck that I want to show you is the Neon Moon Tarot by Pixel Occult. And the reason why this let's say reminds me of a picture book is because I used to, especially let's say I started a couple of years ago, I started reading a lot of graphic novels of the cyberpunk genre. And I really enjoy this art style, and this one is not just because of the art style is very much of that kind of style, you know, that the you can see this with the neon pinks and the purple and the black, but it's also the let's say the drawings themselves. It reminds me so much of those comic books or graphic novels that I used to read. Now, I know that a graphic novel or let's say a comic book is not necessarily called picture book. But I think that, you know, if picture book is something that we used to read when we were little, for example, because we needed the pictures in order for us to follow the story when we couldn't necessarily master reading, I see that nowadays, you know, those traditional picture books sometimes have been replaced with graphic novels like this. And I do see a story in this deck. It definitely reads like there is a story spanning through the decks, and it's an interesting story. It's fascinating. It reminds me a lot of The Crow, the movie The Crow, with Brandon Lee, who unfortunately died on the set while shooting. I don't know if you're familiar with what happened, but it was an accident. And so that movie actually became a cult movie. And I'm happy to say, if you're in Sydney, there is the Hayden Orpheum in, is it Crow's Nest on Neutral Bay? You will excuse me, but in any case, there's only one Hayden Orpheum movie theater in Sydney, and they're actually showing The Crow, the original version of The Crow, towards the end of the month, towards the end of March. So I booked the tickets, and I am so excited about going because my husband hasn't watched that movie. I know that movie there's been a remake that is gonna be released, I think, this year, with I think it's Billy Skarsgård. I don't know how I feel about that. I really love him as an actor, but I don't know how I feel about there being a remake of The Crow, because The Crow was unique. It was fantastic. It was such an amazing movie, and sometimes, you know, remakes, they leave you with a kind of a bitter taste in your mouth because they cannot be exactly as the original was, otherwise people would just not see the point. But on the other hand, if there's changes, it feels like, you know, it's not doing the original justice. So it's a very harsh type of judgment that, you know, you apply when you watch a remake, I believe, or at least that's what I feel. But going back to the picture book, so picture book, this is definitely, it could really be one of those cyberpunk graphic novels that really has a plot and you can follow that through the cards in the deck. and I absolutely love this art style. So this is the Neon Moon Tarot. So the next deck that I'm going to show you today is the Book of Shadows, an alchemist story by Andrea Aste. Andrea is an Italian illustrator who lives in London, I believe. He's also the author of there's another, the Book of Shadows tarot deck, and also the Tarot of Light and Shadow. You will definitely recognize Andrea's art style because it is so very unique, I would say. And truth be told, in this case we do have an actual picture book. So this was a Kickstarter, I believe, from probably a year and a half ago, and it came with this really chunky book. And as you can see, we've got a bit of everything inside the book, but as you can see, it actually is like a graphic novel. And the concept behind the book, and the concept also behind the deck, is to show how the story of tarot has evolved during the century. And it comes from, indeed, from you know, the concept of alchemy and the study of the discipline of alchemy. And so this is a really unique deck, not just because of everything that is gone behind the production of this deck, but it's also because it really brings up the fact that whenever you're a tarot reader, tarot collector, or also a creator, illustrator, it's a whole world that you're looking at. It's a whole world made of history. It's obviously the actual history about how tarot was discovered, as illustrated in the book, is not based on true fact. It is fiction, but it does have all of the it could very well be true, because there's bibliography, there's references to existing books and everything. And to be honest with you, as a reader, so Andrea never had the intention of passing it for something true. It was always very clear that it was his creation. But what happens when you actually use this deck, and when you look at the book and you read the graphic novel and you read the interviews with tarot creators and tarot experts, etc., you kind of enter a binding contract. It's the same kind of contract you enter when you start reading a fiction novel or when you watch a movie. And it is this suspension of disbelief. So you stop misbelieving, you stop doubting, you stop asking yourself whether what you're watching, if it's a screen, or what you're reading, if it's a book, is actually true or not, and you're just there to enjoy the ride. And so that's exactly how I feel whenever I use or even use this deck, or even just look at the cards, because it's a really beautiful deck. And the art style, I think that, you know, obviously it's personal, whether you like a deck or not, but I think that there are a few things that we can agree on, that it takes a certain mastering of the skills of illustration in order to be able to produce something this beautiful. And I absolutely love the colors. I mean, when you have such saturated, vibrant colors, this is exactly what I really, really like. So this is another one of my decks that really reminds me of a picture book, and it's the Book of Shadows, an alchemist story. So the next deck, it's actually two decks, and I'm talking about the Tarot Yokai. So the Yokai Tarot, let's say that's the Italian version of a tarot deck based on yokai, and the Floating World Tarot. Now, these ones have come to my attention when I was looking for alternatives to the Yokai Yochi Tarot, because I am going down the rabbit hole with my members, with my Sunlight and Starlight members, and we're doing this deep dive on the yokai world, or the Japan supernatural world. Now, if you're not familiar with what a yokai is, it is indeed a supernatural being that exists in the folklore. It has been existing in the Japanese folklore for a couple of centuries, if not longer. Some of it is has been born with Japan, within Japan. Some of it is actually been imported from China. But you're probably familiar with the concept of manga. So manga is very much based, a lot of characters from manga stories are actually based on yokais. So I've actually found these two decks. First of all, the Toroki Yokai, so the Yokai Tarot. It's an absolute gem when it comes to the true association, let's say, between the yokais and the meaning of the card in the tarot system, in particular in the RWS system. Now this deck, as I said, I have the Italian edition, but I also know that there's a French edition of this deck. It's by Noi Noi. I really hope that they'll be convinced to produce an English edition as well. Being Italian, of course, this is not a problem for me to read. And as you can see though, because it's very similar, the setup of the book, you have a full page with the card that they're describing. You have the Japanese name of the yokai in specific, then you have the transliteration in Romaji, so in our alphabet, Suzuhi, Ko, Huime. And then you've got the association with the tarot card. So in this case, we're looking at the Queen of Cups. And then we're going to look at the description. There's actually an explanation of who Susui Kohime is and why we actually associate this particular yokai to the Queen of Cups. I have to say, and then of course you got the upright meaning with the keywords and you have the reverse meaning with the keywords. I really enjoy this guidebook, and it really feels to me like there's a lot more correspondences, as I said, between the yokais chosen to represent the card and the meaning of the cards themselves. And the reason why I'm saying that is because, sorry, I just smile every time I see this. This is the Maneki Neko, which is the supernatural cat that actually brings a lot of good luck and money in specific. But you're probably more familiar with the representation of the Maneki Neko as a really smiling cat, you know, looking at you, so not looking at their mom. And you will remember that this one has an arm that has a mechanism inside that lets you tilt it, so the arm technically goes up and down, and the movement of going up and down of the arm is what is believed to bring good luck and money to the person who's owning this Maneki Neko. Now this one is really spot on for me because the Maneki Neko in itself is related to a windfall, and the Nine of Coins or Nine of Pentacles is also related to a windfall. So I have to say this deck has actually surprised me by looking at all of these cards and the way in which they have been paired up with the meaning of the story or the legend behind the yokai. So it's a really beautiful, fully colored deck. As you can see, we got the Kitsune, of course. Some of these cards actually correspond to the Yokai Yochi, but I have to say, it is, even though the Yokai Yochi is a wonderful tarot deck, please don't get me wrong, I have nothing against it. It's one of my favorite. And it will never leave my collection because I absolutely really love it. But I do believe that the associations between yokais and meanings of the cards is actually better in this deck rather than in the Yokai Yochi. The cardstock is not my favorite. I've seen that Sharon, for example, at Trio Witches Tarot has been, she's laminated this deck. And I think though that she recently said that the lamination she chose was a bit too thick, and so she's probably going to buy a new copy and try different type of settings. I'm not entirely sure, but in any case, it is a very thin kind of cardstock. However, I also have to say that in my case, because of, you know, my injuries, it's actually easier to shuffle. So to be honest with you, you know, you can't have it all. You can't have the perfect cardstock with the perfect thickness and then being able to refill and bridge shuffle. Or, you know, you can have the possibility to bridge and reshuffle, but then you don't have the cardstock you like. It's absolutely fine. I love this deck the way it is, and I really enjoy using it. And as I said, because we're doing this really fun adventure with my members, it is a deck that is always on my table. And recently, and that's the reason why I wanted to show these two together, because I'm doing this research on the use of yokais throughout culture and cultural means in Japan. So we see, for example, that yokais have been used many times when looking for inspiration for manga characters. And so in this case, I look at this deck. This is the Floating World Tarot, and it's not necessarily a tarot based on manga characters. However, the style of the illustration, which is by Miya Komatsu, is actually very similar to a certain style of manga we are probably used to see. This deck, however, is based on the ancient traditions of the tarot within the Japanese spiritualism. So what we have is a really beautiful rendering of what's supernatural in Japan, and you know, and the tradition of tarot. And I think it's really interesting. So you've got this is in English, by the way. It's a mass market deck published by Epic Inc. And it's got a really nice introduction where you do have a couple of specifically themed spreads. For example, you've got the haiku spread, then you've got the pushdo and the geisha spread, and also the comic book spread. So a comic book is, you know, the word for manga in Japanese. And then you got the Floating World spread, which is a Celtic cross, basically. We don't have that much information when it comes to the cards themselves. As you can see, we got two in the same page, but it is a smaller kind of font, so you'll still be able to find what you like. It's also really interesting. What I'm missing is the fact that there's no specific identification, let's say, of these characters. So of course we got the Fool, we got the Magician, but do they correspond to a specific character in Japanese spiritualism or supernatural traditions? That's what I'm kind of missing. So what happens is that in a few cases I can actually recognize them, because after doing a lot of research, after a while something actually sticks with you. And in this case, for example, this is the rabbit. The rabbit is a very important figure in the Japan supernatural, and it's a yokai that has been imported from China because, as you can imagine, by looking at the moon without a telescope, of course, the darker sides of the face of the moon look a little bit like a rabbit. And so there is this legend of a rabbit that lives in the moon. So that one is recognizable. There's a couple of other figures that are recognizable. What I do appreciate about this deck, though, is the fact that it's, first of all, very beautiful. I really like and enjoy this kind of art style. But also the fact that it gives you an alternative that sits between, as I said, the manga tarot, of which we have a few examples, even by Lo Scarabeo, I think by Llewellyn as well, and other publishers. So it sits in between the manga tarot and the yokai tarot, or let's say the manga tradition converted into tarot deck and the yokai tradition converted into tarot deck. And by the way, can I just show you the fact that the minors are not pips, they're actually fully scenic and illustrated, which is always, you know, sometimes it's a deal breaker. And I completely understand that. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys could see that. So I have never seen this deck in any channels before. I haven't seen it on Instagram, etc. And I wonder why, because it's actually really beautiful. Of course, when it comes to the minors, you have a little bit less of an explanation, but it's always there. And I reckon it can be used by anyone on any level of knowledge of tarot. Sorry, I was chuckling because I saw the Five of Cups and the figure of the rabbit being completely distraught, because that's the sense of loss, of course. So it's also cute, as you can tell, it's also kind of cute. So this is the Floating World Tarot, and sorry, I just completely forgot to show you the cards, of course. I was so taken by the book. So let's have a quick look at the cards. But you've seen them in the guidebook. It's a beautiful deck. Again, I don't know if I say it or not, but the cardstock is not the best. It's not the best. It's very papery, but it feels almost as if it's one of those cards that actually gets really ruined if you do, for example, if you use overhand shuffling, or if you use the wash-up method of shuffling. It feels like the edges of the cards may be easily frayed, so it's not something that I necessarily recommend. As a matter of fact, please be aware of this kind of cardstock. I don't know how to say this without being criticizing it, but it doesn't feel like it's one of those decks that will last you for 10 years, let's put it this way, if you use it a lot, because it feels like it's actually a bit fragile and that it can be damaged quite easily. Thing that I couldn't say, for example, about the Tarot Yokai or the Yokai Tarot, even though, you know, in that case I was complaining about the fact that it was a thin cardstock in this case, but it was perfectly usable. In this case, I have to say, I feel like I have to be really careful, particularly if you do bridge shuffling. It feels like you can actually bend the cards. I might be completely wrong. Maybe it's a new type of cardstock that actually doesn't get ruined. I don't know. I always apply a lot of care when I use my deck, so I don't want to try and see how far you can bend it before it actually breaks, you know what I mean? Because if I do break it, then yeah, I'm not necessarily happy about having to buy a new copy. So this is the Floating World Tarot, and they both remind me of picture books, because this is the theme of the tag. What I wanted to say is that there's so much about Japan supernatural that has made its way into anime and manga. So anime is the animated version of manga, of course. And I have a few, but this is just really centered around, as you can see, yokais. It's a really interesting book. It's more like let's say a study book. And it talks about all of these, well, some of these yokais. Yokais are there's hundreds of them, so obviously you need a very comprehensive book if you want to study them, which is something that we're actually doing that as well with my members, as I was saying. I have bought a few let's say mangas in order to be able to, for example, find the kitsune or find the tanuki or find the kappa in those stories. And I have to say that the kappa, I was just mentioning the kappa is quite present in history. The kappa is often present in mangas, for example, and animes as well. When I was little, I was always watching Japanese anime. So I don't know whether I'm still sticking to the tag or I'm going a little bit off tangent, because of course we're talking about, again, manga as in graphic novels. But again, you know, picture books, when I look at the new generation, these are the new picture books that they're looking at, and they're you know, they're being read out loud by their parents before they're going to bed. Hopefully they're not read out loud the stories of Japan supernatural, because I don't think that is particularly conducive for sleep, but you never know. So another one of, let's say, decks that remind me of picture books is the Jumbow Tarot. And this is in a more traditional sense, because it definitely reminds me of the picture books based on, for example, the Brother Grimm's tales. And it's a really, really beautiful deck. This is by Los Carabeo. I have two versions of this deck. One I actually trimmed completely down to just the artwork, so it's got a really like almost poker size, I would say, size. So let me just zoom in because otherwise I doubt you can actually see the images. There we go. So this is definitely, it takes you into this magical realm of, you know, a northern country. So obviously it's got this feeling of a Scandinavian country, where, you know, there's all of these characters in these adventures, and you can practically hear a narrator talking over these cards and describing the scenes and you know, telling you what the story behind them is. These are really, really beautiful cards, and that's the reason why I wanted at least one copy to be trimmed down to just the artwork, because it's just absolutely amazing to me. At the beginning, in order to be able to read with this, because it's not necessarily straightforward as a meaning and association with the card they represent, I actually put the initials, let's say, or a small numbering at the bottom of the card. So in this case, this is the Ace of Pentacles. And obviously you can clearly tell it's referring back to a story where, you know, there was the story, it's the beginning of the story, whereas this character is just going off on an adventure, perhaps because they need money, perhaps it's because it's snowing or something, I don't know. But it does remind me a lot of the, let's say, Christian Andersen's tales or the Brother Grimm's tales. So a very much Germanic language kind of story tales that I used to read when I was little. And to be honest with you, I actually really enjoy pretty much right now. I did buy another copy of the deck and I did not trim it, because when I want to use it, let's say for readings for myself or for clients, not that I don't necessarily read with this deck a lot, I have to say, but you know, should a client wish for me to read with this deck, then in that case at least I have a copy that has already the references on the cards, and I don't feel like I need to lift up from the card in order to understand what the references to the tarot are. And I enjoy having two of them. They're quite you know, affordable, because it is a Lo Scarabeo deck, so obviously it's got mass market prices. Look at this card, how beautiful this is. So this is the Jumbow Tarot. So the next deck is the Tarot Bot, and this one is a fantastic deck by Michael Murdoch. By the way, this is suburbdesigns.com. This is the website that takes you to Michael's main activity, which is actually interior design, but he's also an artist, and he produced this deck. To be honest with you, I don't know whether this deck is still on sale or not. But I can certainly, you know, do a research. So when I post this video, before I post it, actually, I would just make sure to find out whether it's available to be purchased or not. Now, this deck is in this tag for me because it reminds me so much of, you know, picture books based on sci-fi that were very, very popular when I was little. And I think there was one publisher, I think it was Urania, but I could be wrong, and I don't even know whether that publisher still exists. But they used to publish a lot of books based on, let's say, rendition of Isaac Asimov's books or Philip K. Dick books. Philip K. Dick, by the way, if you want a reference, is the one that wrote, what's the title again? Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheeps? And that is the base of, well, it inspired the production of the movie Blade Runner. So Blade Runner is one of my top 10 movies of all time. It's absolutely fascinating, and I find that it's the epitome of cool. So, but very close, let's say it's the second coolest movie of all time, because to me the first one has to be John Wick. And don't ask me to pick one of the 4 episodes. And by the way, I just heard, I hope that it's true, but I just heard that it's going to be a John Wick #5 released in 2025. So as soon as they open the pre-sale for the tickets, I just gonna, I don't know, I think I'm gonna find the most expensive theater in Sydney, probably the IMAX, if they show it in the IMAX. And I'm just gonna buy the best seat because I just want to watch that movie. And I'm so very excited about watching John Wick again. You know, John Wick, they should make a John Wick deck. There's no 2 ways around that. John Wick is the Baba Yaga, so there should be a Baba Yaga deck. You know, dressed as John Wick. So this deck really reminds me of those picture books based on sci-fi, and it was a kind of a fantasy related theme, but more when it was fantasy in hyperspace, for example. So this is the Tarot bot. And the next deck is the Tarot of the Sweet Twilight. I do have the Italian version, which is, you know, whenever I say the Italian version, well, it's a Lo Scarabeo deck, so obviously there's going to be like 25 languages on the cards. This is one of the older edition. Nowadays they don't actually do that anymore. They really upped up the antes when it comes to tarot cards. They're really beautiful, and they borderless for most of the new decks. So this one is, to me, this is just a Willy Wonka / any other movie by Tim Burton. And in this case, you know, it was a close second at the what's it called, the Dark Dimension Tarot, which is even more so reminding me of Tim Burton's movies. So in specific, for example, The Corpse Bride. But this is Willy Wonka, you know, on steroids. To me, this is, each and every one of these characters could very well be cast in Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka as both from the movie and the book, let's put it this way, because obviously we're talking about picture books. And I really enjoy looking at this as if it were one of those books that were indeed, you know, read to me when I was little and I was just going to bed and I needed either mom or dad. Mostly it was dad that was reading to me, stories to me, and it mostly was about pirates because he liked pirates and I liked them too, of course, because it was, you know, obviously it was so nice to hear him talk about these adventures. But this is quintessential Willy Wonka to me because of the colors probably, and also because many of the characters have these kind of features that remind me so much of the way in which I picture Willy Wonka. And by the way, I refer to both the the older movie with Johnny Depp impersonating Willy Wonka, but also the more recent one with Timothée Chalamet, because I believe that they're actually really they're really both really faithful to the way in which Willy Wonka has been, let's say, depicted. And I just feel the fantasy, the atmosphere that these cards take me into, and it's really, really beautiful. I also really enjoy the contrasting colors. These are so beautiful together. This color palette is fantastic. And you know, they're very saturated and vivid, and I really, really enjoy it, to the point that I know that there's a few of you out there that have actually trimmed this deck down to the artwork. I'm hesitating to do so because I bought this deck back in Italy a couple of years ago, because back then it wasn't available in Australia and it would have costed me $60 to do so. So I don't want to spend another $60 on this deck. It's a Lo Scarabeo deck and it shouldn't be that much money. But as soon as it comes in stock in Amazon Australia, I'll probably grab a copy and I may try and trim off the borders. So the next deck is not necessarily a picture book itself. I'm talking about the Murder of Crows Tarot, which has been illustrated by Corrado Roy. But Corrado Roy is one of the most prolific illustrators of graphic novels and picture books. in Italy, and his style is very recognizable and it's one of my favorite, by the way. And so so there's one which is called Dracula, for example, and another one which is based on, I think it's Frankenstein, and there's another one that is based on Nosferatu, I believe. And those ones are literally just, yeah, picture books as the more, let's say, common or popular way to describe a picture book. So this deck actually reminds me of those ones, simply because the art style is very much the same. And it's a beauty of a deck. It's one of my favorite. It is very dark. It's a very dark deck. I mean, you can tell immediately, of course. And of course, it's not for everyone. It's because it is this dark. There will be a lot of people just not feeling called by this deck, or feeling that it is too dark, it is too... there's almost this sense of despair, I would say, that permeates the cards. And in a way, it tells a story of despair. It tells a story of darkness that, you know, you can feel that from each and every one of these cards. And yet, I do feel that sometimes that's exactly what we need. And as such, I believe that Corrado Roy's style is perfect for this kind of deck. It really gives it an additional layer of meaning, I would say. And it's fantastic to read with, by the way. Of course, it's not for the kind of daily 3 cards pull that you can do in the morning. This is one of those decks that is probably best associated with the shadow work, and then, you know, maybe paired up with an oracle deck. For example, it pairs up really well with the Journey of a Lonely Soul oracle deck, which is also by Los Carabel. They do share a very similar vibe. Or it's one of those decks that you use in a certain season of the year because, you know, perhaps it's darker outside and you feel like you actually want to be in the company of these decks, which are undoubtedly dark. But dark, to me, in many, many cases, means beautiful. It means fascinating. It means intriguing and captivating. And I really, really enjoy it. And by the way, there is another deck. I'm not going to show it today because I've shown it several times before. But it was the result of a Kickstarter campaign from the last months of last year, and so it was called the Yokai Tarot. And the Yokai Tarot is also illustrated by Corrado Roy, and the concept of that deck is absolutely fantastic because it's based on the concept that the Joker, or rather the Fool, is the only custodian of the truth. And so it really corroborates that with all sorts of quotes from big philosophers and books from you know, our culture, which is very, very interesting. But in any case, this is the Murder of Crows Tarot. And last but not least, I wanted to mention the Bohemian Gothic Tarot by Alex Ukolov and Karen Mahoney, which is, you know, the minds and the hands behind the Baba Studio. I think this is the 3rd edition, correct me if I'm wrong. I absolutely love this deck, and it's a kind of an honorable mention to me because this deck it does remind me of a picture book in the sense that it does have a narrative. It feels like it's telling a story, a plot, you know, with a beginning and an ending, and it feels like these images are actually a visualization of the words of that story. And so as such, I do see it as, you know, reminding me of a picture book. This is one of my favorite decks in the sense that it's very unique. Of course, it's a Bohemian Gothic, so it's a darker kind of deck compared to others for sure. Well, you know, we can see that, of course. But at the same time, it does have a kind of a cheeky sense to it because there's a few cards that actually invite you in the scene itself. And they ask you to participate in whatever it is that is actually happening there. And I really love that. And I find that in these type of decks, so darkish decks, let's say darker decks compared to others, you don't have this duplicity, this ambivalence of the intention. So there is this kind of, even this figure, for example, is the magician. Of course, it's, you know, it couldn't be darker. You know, it's at night and there's clouds covering the moon outside and something cooking in the cauldron, you don't know what it is. And, you know, these magician themselves look at the nails that they've got, and there's a skull on the table. So you have the elements of the magician, but at the same time, you also have an invitation to look at the card and see what's going on here. And I really like that. And it's not in just one or two cards, it's in many cards. Even this Nine of Swords, you see this kind of phantom, this kind of ghost that is flying around, and this person in bed trying to pray to protect themselves probably. But, you know, we feel like it's a bit of a lost cause because, yeah, everything is dark. Or even the smile, the cheeky smile, the Empress in this case, and the cheeky frozen smile of the girl at her side. Or, you know, the Frankenstein that is trying to take off all of the bandages. Or even the Lovers card, which is absolutely the cheekiest of them all for me. I mean, there is this sense of doom, but at the same time, there is also a sense of ridiculous. And I'm saying ridiculous not to mean that the deck or the image is ridiculous, but there is that sense of, let's say, whimsical then. Let's rephrase it this way. There is a sense of whimsical, even on the Seven of Wands, for example. This is... Okay, maybe it's my sense of humor, but let me tell you one thing. I remember laughing my heart, that I was literally crying from laughter, let's say, when I watched The Rear. So The Rear is the Kingdom, translated to The Kingdom, which is a movie in several parts by Lars von Trier, which is a Danish movie director, very popular, famous, let's say back in the late 90s. And I don't know if you watched The Kingdom. If you haven't and you have this kind of humor, like if these cards, look at this one, come on, the Seven of Cups, look at the expression on her. So if this is whimsical to you and you do find it kind of a humor, tongue-in-cheek kind of humor, watch The Kingdom if you can. I don't know whether you can find it. Let me think. I don't think that they show it in any streaming service, but you could probably find at least bits of it on YouTube, I'm guessing. But if you can, watch it, because there's the tragic and the grotesque and the macabre, even really macabre, and the elements of horror as well, but everything is together with a really strong sense of humor. And I don't know how better to explain that, but I was laughing, and I remember watching it at a premiere at the Festival of Venice. I had a press pass at that time. I was writing in a cinematographic magazine, and so I remember I was surrounded by critics much more serious than me and with much more experience than me, obviously, and they were literally scared, really scared by some of the scenes in the Kingdom, and I was laughing and they were looking at me like I was crazy. I felt like, for the first time, I felt like I didn't belong to I didn't belong with them, because I was like, come on, you can't laugh at this, then, you know, it's so sad that you can't laugh at it. I mean, look at the Five of Swords. Sorry, it just makes me laugh. Okay, you probably think that I'm crazy right now, so I'm just gonna close with that. Okay, that's it. So this is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot, and it's one honorable mention of this really fun tag, which is Picture Book Decks by Second Thoughts About the Mission. Thanks for staying with me till the end of this video. Have a great day.